We got into water a little bit. Different people I've talked to have asked a few questions about it, but the water situation starts with the sky. So you're looking at what falls from the sky rather than taking it out of the aquifers. And that also means rain and snow melt. We got into a little bit of discussion on why the roof is sloped the way it is due to, like we were first doing the roofs, just to review a little bit, sloping south to collect the sun to melt the snow, and then got into the fact that that makes more details, and now we're doing this. So you'll see the building next door, the education facility, and the one they call Corner Cottage, has this configuration, which works great. It's just more expensive than this. So we're obviously headed for, making things more economical. And so this is where we're at now with our skylights and our battery box and everything out here in the front. And we just have a very simple roof, overhanging, dropping into cisterns, thermal wrap, and tire wall. So looking at the roof first, it starts with the roofing material. And I mentioned yesterday to look at this roof, which was the Bry material with it, and it started deteriorating and needing its acrylic coating every few years, so we went ahead and spray foamed it, which is not bad. You have to put acrylic coating on it, but a lot of places around the world don't have the spray foam coating. We're looking at trying to come up with a universal design that has basic qualities that can be used around the world. So we went next door. This was the first building we built out here. Next door, we went to just a material called EPDM rubber. It lasts for 10 or so years. You can see by it next door that it's going to need maintenance soon. And then the next building over is when we started going to metal, and I got into the fact that metal does create issues because of the detailing, especially with the kick-up. So this configuration of roof was aimed at getting metal, which is very subtle, and it collects even moisture in the cisterns. We've seen it dripping from just dew, and collects clean water. It's a very simple lifetime roof. You can't really go wrong, so we were into making some design sacrifices. It turned out they weren't sacrifices, because now we heat this thing and melt the snow from underneath, and it's the same difference, just a lot cheaper. So the roof is the beginning, and if you're going to do catch water, and water's a big issue these days, so you should, you're looking for, in my opinion, after all the years we've been fooling with it, you're looking for a metal roof. And a metal roof that, if you are in a climate where it does freeze, then you're looking for heating it with the solar panels that we put up here that also double as hot water heating. And we just pipe some of it through underneath the roof to melt. And you can get a glimpse of that system at the latest one called Sutton that Kirsten's going to take you to. You can look at on the edge, you can see these pipes. There's a gutter back here. You can see the solar collectors up here. Back in the back, there's a closet where you can see the pump and the tank that stores the hot water and so on. So that's the beginning of harvesting water, is a roof surface. The square footage of the roof is relative to, you do the square footage of the roof. I won't do all the math right now, but basically you can do the square footage of your roof, and then that would be also how many cubic feet your roof would be if you had 12 inches of precipitation a year. There's 7 gallons in a cubic foot, So you can then get how many gallons of water for every inch of rain or every 12 inches of rain your roof can collect. Then you can take your annual rainfall, and ours, you could say ours is 8 here. It's really probably 7 here on the mesa, but call it 8. That would be 0.66 of a cubic foot. There's 7 gallons in a cubic foot. And do the math, and you can find out how many gallons of water a year you can collect. Then you can size your cisterns accordingly. And then, due to the fact that this water system uses the water 4 times, in a normal household, a person, the calculations from, say, the state engineer who calculates the water usage of a person in an average house, it's something like 96 gallons a day. Because we use the water 4 times, ours comes out to be 19 per day. And this is certified or whatever, endorsed, let's say, by the state engineer of New Mexico. He helped us come up with this figure after I went down there to the state engineer's office, and who handles all the water in the state, controls all the aquifers and everything. And I said, we want to do a catch water system. And he said, this is years ago. And he said, well, that's really cool, but there's just not enough water in this that falls from the sky here to do a catch water system. And I told him what we wanted to do, which was we catch the water in a cistern from the roof, and then we use the water, say, to take a bath. Then we recollect the water after the gray water planters to flush the toilet. That waters some indoor plants. That's a second use of water. Flushes the toilet. That's a third use of water. And then the toilet water goes outside through a conventional septic system and into another rubber lined cell, which you'll see at the Sutton house because there's one under construction there. And that does landscaping. So see, when you take a shower, that uses, say, 5 gallons of brand new fresh water. When you water a bunch of indoor plants for food or decor or whatever, that uses another 5 gallons of fresh water. When you use the toilet, that takes used to be 5 gallons of water. They have low flush toilets now. And then when you landscape outside, again, that's brand new fresh water that a normal household uses. We use that same 5 gallons of water over and over and over and over again, which is how we can come up with this figure. So then you can say 19 gallons a day per person and match that to what you can get on your roof, and you'll find that 2 people living in a normal-sized house in an area like this that has 7 to 8 inches of precipitation a year in liquid will work. And the state engineer was super psyched about it because it would cause us to be pumping less water from the aquifers that are waning in New Mexico. So he helped us come up with these figures. And so that's the basis of it right there. But then the water, you're getting the water on the roof. The next step is you have to get the grasshopper wings and bird shit and whatever else out of it, dirt and dust. We have silt catches. We've gone through all kinds of silt catches. If you look around at the different roofs, you'll see lots of different basins that begin to collect the water. It goes through those on its way to the cistern. The one we're at now, this is after, a couple of decades of evolution, is we went online, and you can see this at Corner Cottage, and I don't think the Sutton one has it in yet. Corner Cottage is probably the only place we've got this installed because it's relatively new. You want something that water can run in, and it's just going to filter it, basically. In this climate, we don't have a bunch of leaves and things like that. You have to get more serious with your clean out if you in an area that has a lot of deciduous trees. But here we're just talking about insects and dirt and dust and whatever, and pieces of plants or whatever that end up on the roof. What we found is a big stainless steel bowl online, and we went and drilled a bunch of holes in it. We fill it full of gravel, and we run the scuppers off of the gutter into it. And I think they've even got these installed next door. So definitely go up and walk around the roof next door. I would say don't walk on the roofs, walk around them to see all of this. So your water at the end of a roof goes into a typical rain gutter. Sometimes we make them bigger if it's more, if there's more precipitation than a regular gutter. And then that goes into scuppers that just take it into these stainless steel bowls, giant bowls, full of gravel. And that's the first filter. It's just a silt catch. If you are in an area that has a lot of deciduous trees, you put a screen over that that's removable so that the leaves pile up on that and the water goes through, and then you can take the screen off and dump the leaves off. You have to, in different climates, deal with the situation a little bit different. Basically, you got 2 points here already. One is the cleanest material that catches the cleanest water, and low maintenance, and then silt catching to clean up that water. That's the next step. Another thing about metal roofs, there is a brand of metal called ProPanel that's sold throughout the U.S. It is the best one because the baked-on enamel coating that they use doesn't have lead in it. Some of the other brands, there's a little bit of lead in their baked-on coating, and it kind of deteriorates over the years and gets flatter, and that deterioration ends up in your water. So you want to, the ProPanel brand, we know you don't really see any ProPanel here that's gone flat. It holds up better. And another good thing to do is test your water occasionally anyway. We test, the county used to make us test our water all the time. And one time we tested it with a test of the water at the courthouse, and which was city water, town water, and ours tested better. So we aren't getting too much flack about it anymore. They're just thrilled that we're not using the aquifers. So we have our own water, and like even if you get to a climate that even has 6 or 5 inches of rainfall, you can come up with a rationalization, like we're doing one in Baja now, and they're down there around 6 or 7, and they're having a bigger family in this building. So what we're doing is we're just extending the roof even more. Coming up in there, we're doing little palapas up here that drain onto the roof and whatever. The point being that you can extend your roof surface with the numbers, doing the math, to match the rainfall to give you what you need for a family of 2, 3, 4. And see, usually if you have a house with 2 people in it, the house is this size. If you have a house with 4 people living in it, the house is that size. So that increases the roof size, which equates to the increased use of water. And then you determine how many cisterns. Like we're doing, the ones here will put in 6,000 gallons of cisterns, which are, we use 1,500 gallon cisterns, so we use 4 of them on a typical house. We're doing the same thing in Texas, and they get we get 8 inches of precipitation a year here. Texas, where we're going, East Texas, gets 4 inches a month, 3 to 4 inches a month. So one thing we're going to do is tarp the site so we aren't pounding tires in the rain. Pounding tires in the rain, for you guys that pounded tires yesterday, imagine your sledgehammer coming back up with a wad of mud on it like that, It just doesn't go away. We did that in Scotland. And so the 4 inches a month means if you do the math on 4 inches a month, these people are catching enough water for 2 months every month, according to the usage in one of these houses. So this is taking water out of the equation of, taking from the earth. Because there's many places, they say the aquifers under Santa Fe and Albuquerque are going to be deplete in a few years. They're going to start taking the Rio Grande. We're good on aquifers here, but it's 700 feet down, and it takes a lot of energy to pump it up, so we don't use it. This community has one well that the county made us put in over there, and it's for fire, storage of water for fire, and it's just a token thing. Nobody ever uses it. So the story there is that if you get less, you're heading toward 6, 5, 4, you increase the roof, you look at the biggest torrential rain in recorded history, and make your roof and your cistern size to stash it. For instance, like Phil, the guy that was pounding tires yesterday, he and I went out a few years back and during a torrential rain, and we saw our roof running into our scupper, and basically we saw our cistern running over because there was too much rain all at once. Well, in this climate, that's a waste. We immediately made our scuppers and our cisterns bigger on our next design because we don't want to waste a drop of water in this climate. So you want to design your system, and it's all the same components. Some are bigger, some are larger, just like with electricity. Some of the panels are, sometimes you have more panels, sometimes you have more batteries. I'll go into that. But you're looking at designing for the worst torrential rain so that you don't waste a drop of water, unless you're in East Texas, and then you can waste rain. The cisterns all have overflows. So in East Texas, I was just going to put in 2 cisterns because they're going to get filled up every month anyway. I went ahead and put in 4 for just to have, you know, my rationale there was that who knows with climate change if they're going to continue getting 3 or 4 inches a month. So, but you can, if you got more rainfall, you can have less cistern and less roof space. And if you have less rainfall, you have more cisterns and more roof space. It's just that simple. Here, we've developed this where it's a pretty minimal rainfall, and we make it work that way, and due to the 4 uses of the water. So that brings us from roof to silt catch, which is the second component. The third component is the cistern itself. We did a lot. Kirsten may have showed you pictures up at Reach of the Reach community of indoor cistern up there. It's really nice. There's a cistern here indoors. But the downside, and I've already talked about this to some people, the downside of an interior cistern is, one, people say, well, hell, I could make a bedroom in there, and I'm making a whole big room just for a cistern. So it's square footage costing what it does. It's kind of not that economical to make a whole room for a cistern. Second of all, in the winter, when icy water is coming into that cistern, it's coming into the room, and we're making a heat sink so that, you know, as in physics, the heat goes to the coolest place. So the cistern is cold water sucking all the heat out of the room. So an indoor cistern, if you want a water feature, do what we're doing at the Phoenix. You'll see that today. It's just an indoor pool. You know, it's not a cistern. Because it becomes room temperature, and of course then you can grow fish in it and everything. You're not going to grow fish in your drinking water, probably. And I mean, I'd try it if it could work. But so the cisterns then, we have gone through. You'll see indoor cisterns. You see we've made cisterns out of tires. Like in the green modular one there, the blue circle is a tire cistern. There in the old Nautilus house is a round blue circle. That was a cistern made out of tires. We just plaster the inside. It's like making a whole room. It's almost as expensive. You have to put a roof on it and so on. So it's really down to, again, economics, time, whatever. We end up buying these variable rectilinear cisterns that we can get delivered all over the place. We're getting them delivered to Mexico. They have versions of it in Europe. We would have to build maybe a tire cistern. Like when we went to the Andaman Islands, this building here, there was no resources. This was in the Andaman Islands, and under this building, we dug a big hole by hand and lined the hole with rubber, and just did a floor over that, and that was a cistern. I mean, so if you're in someplace in Africa, that's what we're going to do. Is we're sort of rehearsing all the time for places we know we're going. You saw the guys mining out the dirt to pound tires with in that second circle. That is going to be the way we would do a cistern in Africa. Is we dig out a hole underneath the floor. We're going to make a cement dome, very shallow dome floor. In other words, this is going to be a method of doing a cistern. We're digging out the hole like that, lining it with rubber, doing a floor over it, and going on up with the building. And so this is sort of a rehearsal over there for that. Although we're going to use it as a room here. But you can just line it with rubber. And we did that there, and it worked fine. I mean, people go to that building for water. That building catches water, and there's no, they don't have wells there. And they had some hand-dug wells, but they got all polluted by the wave of salt water. There were bodies and salt water in the wells. So now we have come to our typical use in this country, for people building in this country, Canada, Mexico, Europe, is a sort of a vaulted, variable plastic cistern. They come 1,700 gallons, and we hook them up in tandem so that all the water seeks its own level. And they're back here on the back of the house. You can, when you go see Corner Cottage across the street is the global model, and it's sort of 80% finished, so you can see the cisterns. That's the best place to look at it. You can see the gutter, you can see the scupper, and the silt catch may or may not be in there yet. And then part of the cisterns are still exposed, and you'll see something going on there that you don't want to happen. We haven't gotten around. We're always on the road and behind and whatever, so we haven't gotten around to burying all of the cisterns yet, and they're full of water, so the water's growing. It's all brown, full of algae. And the cistern's buried in the dark, the water stays clear. So that's something you don't want to happen. We'll use that water for construction and clean them out and go on. So now you got water falling from the sky on a clean metal roof, going through a silt catch and into a cistern. All of that is sized relative to 7 gallons of water a cubic foot, the square footage of roof space, and the number of people in your family. And then you've got your water. Now your water goes gravity feeding through the wall into a pump panel. And the pump panel is called a WOM, Water Organizing Module. On water harvesting over there, there's a picture of it. It's in the closets always in the back of the buildings. You'll see it. You should be able to find it in every house. The key issue with it is that it's gravity fed. The reason for that is so that the pump only has to push the water into a pressure tank. It doesn't have to suck and push, because sucking and pushing wears the pump out quicker. And you can have a cheaper pump that uses less electricity. So there's something I'll keep pointing out, is that every time you factor in any device that uses electricity, you want to design the building and the use of that so that it uses the minimal amount of electricity. In other words, if we were pumping water from a 700-foot well, that's going to take 10 PV panels just to do that. The amount of electricity it takes to pay for to use a little bitty pump just to push water into a pressure tank is like 100th of that. So that's what's called designing down. We are designing the water system so it uses a minimal amount of electricity so that our electricity system can be small. So everything is, you're thinking about everything. It's kind of called layered thinking. As you think about sewage, you're thinking about electricity. As you think about water, you're thinking about sewage. As you think about water, sewage, and electricity, you're thinking about structure. And you think all of these 6 points all the time. Because, and again, I make a lot of analogies to the human body. It's like your nervous system is related to your digestive system and your circulatory system. One goes foul, awry, the other one, it's affecting the other one. So because we've got a lot of plumbers and people that say, well, guys, haven't you heard of, on the water system, haven't you heard of these ultraviolet filters? And we say, because they do filter out bacteria. They use electricity. We don't want filters that use electricity. We barely want a pump that uses electricity. So our water board that you will see, and you can see a picture of it there. Usually we bring one over, but you'll see them installed in the buildings. They're usually always in the back hallway of the building. Ask Kirsten to show them to you. It's a water board. We make it. We put out drawings in the second book on how to make it. And we had a lot of plumbers around the country making them and changing them, putting in, they'd say like, okay, well, these guys must not know about the ultraviolet filters. They'd put one of those in and they'd screw up the power system on the whole house and whatever. So we make them now. We don't even provide drawings of how to make them. But what they consist of is a simple 60 mesh filter that its job is really just to protect this little DC pump that takes a very minimal amount of power, only runs when the pressure tank gets down low enough. The filter's got a cleanable. It's also replaceable, but you can clean it for 2 or 3 years before you have to replace it. So the water gravity feeds to here from the cisterns, goes through the 50 mesh filter, through the pump. The pump then pushes it into a pressure tank nearby, a conventional household pressure tank. And back out of the pressure tank, you have conventional household pressure. Then it goes through another 500 mesh filter and to the house, to the faucets. And then it goes from there on into a 1,000 mesh filter, which sometimes goes through a charcoal filter and into a drinking filter, a bacteria filter. So that's what you'd see on these water boards. And the drinking filter then goes to all the fixtures too. So whenever you see a sink in any one of these buildings, you're going to see 3 faucets, hot and cold and drinking. So we filter bacteria out for drinking and brushing your teeth and stuff like that. And it turns out that there's not any more bacteria in the actual rainwater than there is in a community water system. The real thing that is going for you in a system like this, other than having control of your own water and knowing you're always going to have it, is you don't have fluoride and chlorine in your water. Like when I go to any city, I can't even drink the water because it just tastes like a swimming pool. And I don't even want to touch it, really. So this water is clean, clear rainwater, and we use it 4 times, and that's the nature of the system. The water board is a crucial element in the building. We've evolved and developed it, and we ship it all over the world. The DC pump that pumps it just takes a fraction of electricity. It's about a $160 item. We usually advise people have 1 or even 2 on hand. I mean, it should last 5 or 6 years. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So if you got a couple extra pumps, you're good for 15 or 20 years. So, because we're looking at whatever in the future. So that makes you in total control of your water. You find yourself, this is the same with the electricity too, but if if you're looking at the weather and it says showers for the next 3 or 4 days, why, take a long bath, take a long shower. You always will have enough to live, but sometimes you can live more luxuriously on water. Sometimes you can live more luxuriously on power, depending on what your weather is. You kind of relate to the weather. So that gives you water from the sky. It's as simple as that. It's taken the place of pumping water from a deep aquifer and taking a lot of electricity to do so, and taking, depleting the aquifers, which are finite eventually, and depleting the aquifers affects things underneath the earth, and definitely has an effect on the planet. And like I was telling you yesterday, in that whatever county that is in California, they have depleted their aquifers, created a vacuum, sucked the salt water in and polluted their aquifers, and then dumped their sewage in on top of that. So, it's like we do affect things, but just harvesting water off your roof from the sky is a pretty harmless way to live on this planet. So, before I take that into the sewage, what we do for hot water is Europe has been using gas demand hot water heaters for years. There are water heaters that the cold comes in and they flash on due to a pressure release valve whenever you turn the tap on, and the water gets flash heated. It's on demand flash heated, and that water is So the water comes in cold, it goes through a coil and gets flash heated and comes out hot. So we use those. It uses propane, but in an area like this, you hardly use any propane because what they have is a sensor that if the water, so we got cold water coming in, but we don't push cold water in there. We take the cold water from our pump and our pressure tank to panels on the roof first that are always in this climate getting sun. So that's hot water. Then it goes to the gas demand hot water heater. So then it's coming in most of the time hot. The sensor senses that it's hot and a flash heater doesn't come on. Only if it's cool from 6 cloudy days in a row or something does the flash heater come on. It's just a backup. So we send solar hot water through this. 90% of the time in this climate it doesn't come on, and you go on with solar hot water. So this is part of the system. You'll see this on the Sutton and on the global model that has different than the electrical panels out front. They're the solar hot water and roof melt panels. And so we get hot water from the sun with gas backup, propane backup. And of course, in a cloudier area, you would use a little more propane than we use here, but still it stores it in insulated tank. So like when we were in Montana, the gas hadn't even been hooked up. And the guy had a screaming hot shower. He was blown away. You know, there was no utilities coming to the building. And, you know, he knew what he was buying, but he just hadn't seen it all working for him yet. And the plumber was there, and the electrician was there, and everybody just standing around like it was the first hot shower they had ever seen. You know, we're all going, oh my God. You know, the water is coming out the faucet. There's no power lines there. There's no well. And it's hot. And so it works. So this gives you what I call hot and cold running water, which is, you know, it's thrilling if you're doing it yourself. So, and you are in charge of it, in control of it, the quality of it. You're not getting chemicals thrown in it that you have to deal with, that you don't know whether they're causing cancer or not. And, you know, like, I was just in Baja a few weeks ago because we're doing a project down there, and the guy that I'm doing the project with is living with his family in Mexico City right now. And he was saying that Mexico City is 5 months away from being out of water. You know, they get a lot of rainfall, but they run it off of reservoirs. And the reservoirs are low and not filling back up. And so, you know, can you imagine however many millions of people there are in Mexico City being all there without water? It's going to be it's going to be chaos. So that's what people are looking forward to. And here they are in Mexico City. They get 3 times as much rain as we do. Another situation was I was in London a few years ago in a taxi going from the airport to town. And it was raining so hard that the guy's windshield wipers couldn't keep up with it in one of those little black cabs. And our conversation was about London running out of water. He was telling me London's running out of water, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. All that water just goes down the storm drains, mixes with the sewage, and goes into the ocean or the channel or whatever. And I mean, and I've got endless stories like that. I had people come to a seminar and go up to Washington State to build an Earthship. And they said, we like everything about them, but we're just a little reluctant on this water catchment system, so that we're going to do a well, and we'll pay for the extra panels to pump it and whatever. And they called me up and were talking about, because I was consulting them through the project, and they said, well, we gotten started. We're drilling our well, but we just can't get our well drilled because it won't stop raining. So it's strange out there in the real world. So I don't know. You know, this can work anywhere. You know, there's even when you get down to 5 or 4 inches, you can extend it and make it work. Water comes from the sky. We can use it. Another thing I like about it that I hate about the real world is there's no infrastructure. See, we've got our own water on site from the sky. We got our own power on site from the sky. We treat our own sewage on site. The Hopi Indians, when I first came out here a long time ago, I got the myth that they have, or the legend that they say and have said many years that the earth is going to be taken over by spider webs. When I go back to the cities, I see it. You know, I look through wires at dirty skies, and there's pipes. Albuquerque and Santa Fe have so many pipes and wires and conduits underground, you have to get a permit to dig a hole in your own backyard. So underground and above ground, there's pipes and wires and infrastructure that takes a lot of money to build, a lot of money to upkeep. It goes down, like when the ice got on the lines in the Northeast a few years back, and 6 million people were without power, and I talked about that yesterday. Infrastructure is archaic. It's a thing of the past. It's expensive. It's ugly. Not to mention, a lot of the places I've been recently, looking at sites to build Earthships, there's beautiful land, but there's those giant standards of, power lines going through it, and it's just worthless, and it's marching all across the state, and that's what they had trouble fighting. They were fighting that when we were in France. They wanted to take a giant power line from central France down to the south of France and condemn a bunch of farms and houses and things along the way just to deliver power, and they're going to lose half of it from line resistance on the way there anyway. It is insane what we're doing. Infrastructure is, I hate it. I just think it's, people talk, the president's even talking about, the way he's being advised is to get a solar power system and shove it back into the line grid when you're not using it. All that does is reinforce the need for the line grid, when really you need to decrease the need for the line grid, because all they're going to do is continue to make more of them. And so like I say, it's expensive, it's contaminating in every way, and takes a lot of maintenance, and it makes you vulnerable. In a house that does everything, this home is encountering the sun and the wind and the rain and the thermal mass of the earth, and it's simply, you're the boss of this ship right here, and you're not vulnerable. And that's something for the future, because if we had this great economic crisis here in the last couple of years, as well as fuel shortages and so on, and the gasoline and all of that, how vulnerable do you want to be? Your home can be absolutely not vulnerable to any of that. I mean, if the economics go down, does that mean the infrastructure is going to go down? If they run out, if they have a shortage of fuel, does that mean the infrastructure is going to go down? Well, the infrastructure is subject to that. I think I said something in the Water from the Sky book that anything that goes down, water is going to be affected by it. In other words, if line grids go down, the water is being pumped through the cities. That's going to affect water. If there's fuel shortages, that's going to affect water. If there are natural holocausts, that's going to affect water. If there are droughts, that's obviously going to affect water. Water is affected by, your water supply to your home in a conventional home is affected by almost everything, including an economic crisis. And it puts you vulnerable to rising prices, and a lot of people, everybody's heard about the people in the cities that freeze to death because they can't pay their utility bill, and on and on and on. So anyway, just the overview of one of these kind of homes is not only carbon zero and the logical correct thing to do to keep a green planet in terms of ecology, but it's the best way to save your own ass as well. So, and everything really comes from that. So that's water. That's how we get it, and it's working here. You'll see it in every one of the buildings. It's been working here for 12 or so years, 14 years. I don't know how old this building is anymore. But it's really gotten improved in every one of these systems, is improving constantly. The older buildings do it, but the newer buildings just do it so much cleaner. I mean, I would compare this building and say the studio building over there to like a 49 Ford, And the newer buildings are like, you know, a 2009 BMW. And they're going to keep getting better and better. It's just, yes, the 49 Ford will get you from Maine to California, but the BMW will get you there with a lot more fun and better tunes and air conditioning and whatever, better handling. And so that's the way the new buildings are. So that's water, how you encounter the rain and the snow to get water coming out your faucet hot and cold and drinking. So then connected with that is then the sewage. And that is the major component of that is this thing right here that we call a botanical cell. The newer drawings of this are a little more evolved, but what a botanical cell is, it's even that one back there is early. Everything in this building is early, but it's rubber lined. It's a cell about 3 feet deep. It can be any length. We usually make the links they're relative to how long the rubber comes, so that you don't want to have to splice it. But the botanical cell is usually, sometimes we have them in the first part of the building, behind the first layer of glass, and then we have them in the greenhouse, of course, and then we have them outside. And you can see one under construction outside at the Sutton house that Kirsten's going to take you to. But basically, your water is going through these rubber-lined cells full of plants. The whole issue there is that plants clean up the water. The way they clean up the water, there's a bacteria. First of all, the botanical cell, as you can see, is full of gravel for 2.5 feet. Then there's a little layer of sand or straw or both. The purpose of that is to keep the dirt from falling down into the gravel, because the voids in the gravel create a body of water that the plant, it's like hydroponics almost, that the plants always have access to 1,000 gallons of water. The dirt is just to structure the plants, because they're getting their nutrients from the gray water, and you know, some of it from the dirt, but mainly from the gray water. This drawing was made just from slicing into one of these and seeing what it looked like. The big rocks are what we call reception and reception bulbs, because that creates bigger voids of water, so that, for instance, when your bathtub drains, it's going to drain slow if it goes straight into the gravel. But if you have the big rocks, they're sized so that a whole bathtub can drain fast into the voids between the rocks, and then it moves through the gravel. But it starts with the water going into a device, very similar to like the silt catch on your roof. You have to deal with the fact that out of your shower there's hair and parts of soap and whatever. And in your kitchen sink, there's all kinds of stuff, bacon bits and broccoli pieces and whatever. And so we used to, we keep evolving. We used to want every drop of water to go through the botanical cells, and then we recapture it at the end to flush with. And what's going on in the botanical cell is, in the gravel, there's a bacteria that come naturally that kind of attack the water and clean it up a bit. But the main thing that's going on is, as the plant roots suck up the water, which they do, they put out oxygen. Plant roots are just tubes, and they're sucking up water, probably through a natural convection, like we're sucking up air in the buildings. And as they suck up water, they have to evacuate oxygen. The oxygen oxygenates the water. It's what cleans it up. It's called oxygenation. That's what cleans up the water. And then there's a certain transpiration and evaporation aspect. But that 1,000 gallons of water is moving through the botanical cell, getting sucked up by the plants, getting oxygenated. Then it runs through a peat moss filter at the very end. Then it drops in to a lower place and full of big rocks again. There's a pump, a submersible pump that's down there that's set up on a pressure switch, so that whenever you flush your toilet, the water comes on, and that pump comes on. It's another little pump panel up there on the right. Whenever you flush your toilet, the float valve in the toilet opens up a plumbing valve, which turns on the pump and pumps used oxygenated gray water into your toilet until it fills up, and then it stops. So That's what goes on with this system. And then the toilet goes on out to a conventional septic tank, and I'll get into that. It's still contained. I'll get into that aspect of it. But there's gray, which is this, and there's black, which is the toilet. Well, what I was getting at is that the kitchen sink is kind of borderline because it has solids and pieces and parts in it. And we used to always run the kitchen sink into here because there's a balance. In other words, your daily activities have to produce enough water to deal with the volume of flushing that you do. So we would run all the water into here except for the toilet. But we found out that basically a home is balanced by the clothes washing machine, the sinks where you brush your teeth and wash, and the shower. Those activities produce enough water to give you enough to flush with. You don't need the kitchen sink. But we didn't know that for the first few years. So we made these devices. There's a little tray to catch grease. This is called a grease and particle filter. A lot of the houses used to have them. I don't think any of the new ones have it anymore because now we take the kitchen sink, we consider it black water, take it to the septic tank with the toilet and deal with it that way. We still get enough water to flush with. The only out of balance thing about this is like a situation like here today. You guys are all using the toilet, but none of you are taking showers. So you're depleting our flushing water by not taking showers. So on the break, everybody should go in there and take a shower. But help yourself, for sure. Yeah. Solar hot water, help yourself. So that'll help us get, otherwise Michelle has to go in there and stick a hose down the pipe and replenish the flushing water for you all to flush with. So, but in a normal home with 2 or 3 people living in it, they're taking enough showers to equate to their flushing. And there's a balance there, and we've gotten that together over the years, but we didn't have it together in the beginning, so we had to have so see, if you're just filtering or silt catching your bath water and your clothes washing water, all it is a little copper tray with holes in it. That catches the hair and whatever. Take it out every month or 2 and tamp it on a compost pile and be done with it. But when your kitchen sink ran into here, it was a grease and particle filter situation. It was a much more elaborate device. And that's a picture of it right there. And what you'd have to do is you'd go in and take that tray out, but it'd have bacon and hair and broccoli and grease and all kinds of stuff. It was pretty gnarly. And we'd go, people talk. And so online, we'd hear people talking about, what a nasty job cleaning out and servicing an Earthship grease and particle filter was. Well, we've eliminated that now because we don't use them anymore because we run the kitchen sink in with the toilet. But it got so gnarly that we started going, okay, we'll respond to the people's complaints. And see that little inlet line, that little black inlet line right there, taking that, all the stuff comes out of that and collects in that tray, and that tray gets pretty gunky. And so we got the brilliant idea of taking a woman's hose and radiator clamp, and we'd clamp, so the pipe comes in like this, and all that stuff was going into this little tray. Well, we just radiator clamped a woman's stocking over there, and every couple of months that stocking would just, it would get full and be this big chunk of stuff, slimy thing, laying there, looking sort of alive. And whenever your tub quit draining properly, we'd know that the stocking needed to be changed. And so I had a maintenance guy that used to do that all the time, and I knew if he wasn't around, if the people came to us and said it's not draining properly, why, I would know what to do, and I did it sometimes. And one time we had one of these grease and particle filters right under the kitchen sink in the Hut House, which is not online as a nightly rental anymore. It's a nice little building, but it's out of date. That's a picture of it over there, the white middle one on the left of the left thing. But anyway, underneath the kitchen sink doors there, you'd open the doors, and there's the grease and particle filter with a redwood lid, and you open the lid. And so anyway, this guy, the maintenance guy, threw me a curve. He didn't just get a single woman's hose. He got pantyhose. Put the full pantyhose on there. And so after about 3 months, the hut house quit draining properly. So he wasn't around. So I went in. I knew exactly what to do. I opened the kitchen cabinet doors, popped off the redwood lid, and these two legs, slimy, came slamming out and hit me in the face. It scared me to death. And just gunk all over me and everything. So that was really the inspiration for moving forward from that design. But it hasn't all been easy. So that would definitely get written about online. So we don't even use them anymore. Now we just have a little copper tray. It catches the hair from the bathtub. The kitchen sink is plumbed to go with the toilet to the septic tank. And we have found out that that's enough. People take enough showers and wash enough clothes and brush their teeth enough to create enough flushing water. And, you don't, like in water conservation, they're always talking about don't flush your toilet any more than you have to. Well, here it doesn't matter. You're flushing your toilet because you're flushing it with used water. It just changes the whole concept. We don't even care if you have a low flush toilet or not. So, of course, all toilets are low flush these days, I think. But this is just the kind of evolution. Like we used to go, that's a little redwood cage for the charcoal and peat moss filter. Now we have the charcoal filter on the water board, and it's just a peat moss filter. And still, we used to make a little redwood cage. It'd take a guy a day to make it and put the peat moss in it and all that. And that's evolved because now our botanical cell is linear, and it's about 2 feet wide and 25 feet long or so. And the gravel is all in here and everything. Well, we get a peat moss bale. They come in plastic bales. And we just cram it. We just take an ice pick and stab it a bunch of times, cram it into the space, and the water has to go through it. In other words, we're just constantly getting the methods of doing this more and more simple, more and more straightforward, and work better. So we haven't had much problem with gray water at all in recent history. The corner cottage one we hit rock, and those botanical cells had to go laced up and down over rock and everything. And sometimes the water there doesn't move fast enough to the flushing well, and we have to run the bathtub to do in that one. The Phoenix has got huge gray water planters. It rarely, if ever, runs out of flushing water. And it definitely takes this system to the limits. But anyway, you have what it is then is a botanical cell. You can have, we put them in tandem, link them together. You'll see them in every building, inside the living spaces and in the greenhouse. Clearly, they have to be on the solar gain side of the house so they get sun, because the plant's growing is what sucks up the water. And so we're basically, the first use of the water is taking a shower. The second use of the water is growing food, aloe vera, grapes, bananas, whatever. And then third use is flushing your toilet. Fourth use is landscaping, which I'll get into. And so we have taken these botanical cells now way far into food production. A way that this evolved, just like with the stockings, was before we invented all of this stuff, we were not going to make Earthships use flush toilets. We used compost toilets, which they work fine, but the 90% of the populace, of the people, they want it to go away. They don't want to be dealing with it, whatever. Although compost is a great thing, lots of people don't want to deal with it. So we were still adamant about it. We were going to use compost toilets because we didn't want to flush away even a gallon and a half. Back in those days, it was 5 gallons of water, every fresh, good, new water. Especially if you're harvesting it from the sky, you can't afford to. So in the old days, we were using compost toilets, and since people didn't like them that well, and we're trying to make these things marketable to all the people, we invented a solar toilet. I don't know if Kirsten showed you a picture of it last night in the mountains, and we took it to the Himalayas because nothing breaks down there. And what it does is it takes human waste and turns it to ash. It fries it like in an oven to ash. We had it all figured out where it would it turned out to be less marketable than the compost toilet because we had this thing, this scraper. It was like a oven. A solar oven is what it was, with a toilet seat on it. I mean, that's really all it was. But we had this device in here where it smeared it and made it thin so that the sun would dry it within 40 minutes or something and turn it to ash. And I actually took a mayonnaise jar full of it and put water in it and took it to the water testing place, and they tested it. It was benign of any bacteria. So I had a mayonnaise jar full of shit dust that I took down to the state authorities and dumped it on the guy's desk, and then told him what it was, and he screamed and jumped up out of his desk. But I was always reporting to them what I was doing, and so he said, "Go ahead, work with it. Somebody's got to do it." I wasn't that stupid. I had established doing all this stuff for 40 years. I had established a rapport with all these guys these authority guys down at the state level. And the reason I got into so much trouble was fate would have it that they all within a matter of 2 years retired. One of them retired. There was a bunch of them. One of them retired. One of them had a heart attack and died. One of them had a brain tumor and got cancer and died. And they all just faded away, all within 2 years. And I'm used to going down there and dumping shit dust on their desk and having them do nothing but scream. Well, I went down there, hadn't been down there for a few months, and they're all gone. And they said, "We hear you're doing this and that up there." I said, "Yeah, well, Fred Navarez said I could do that." "Well, he's dead. He doesn't work here anymore, and you are breaking every rule in the book." And so I got in a lot of trouble through what I call the changing of the guard at state level, and that was part of what got me into a lot of the trouble I got into. But anyway, we had the solar toilet, it and the compost toilets, and this is an example of how crisis, I guess, and I think this is going to happen with humanity as well. I've been in this situation a lot. Crisis puts you into a different mode of, panic, and you end up either failing or inventing something. So it was crisis that actually took us to this botanical cell thing, flushing with used water. And the crisis was, I was doing a really custom house. There's a picture of the inside of it over there, that little fireplace thing. It's called the Nautilus. It's up at the top, 2 pictures on that thing too. It doesn't exist anymore. It was engulfed in another whole building. But it was a beautiful house, piece of sculpture, funded by a guy with a suitcase full of cash. I didn't ask any questions. But I wanted it to be a success, and we were getting ready. We had it all designed to put one of these solar toilets in there, and we had been refining them, and that was when we had just built the studios that you're staying in, and they had 2 solar toilets in them. And it turns out that the solar toilet oven was all made out of metal, and it costs like $1,500 to make these things, and and it cost $600 to ship them. So we got all brained out on it and decided to make the oven itself as part of the building and then just ship the components. So what we did is made the ovens over here at these rental units out of masonry. Well, if you've ever put a concrete block out in the sun and a piece of metal out in the sun, you come out a couple hours later, you pick up the concrete block, it's warm. You can't even pick up the piece of metal. So that was the phenomena that we didn't count on. The masonry ovens didn't get as hot. The metal ovens got hot enough to fry shit. So we had the masonry ovens over here, not knowing that we were making a dreadful mistake, and got it all done, and tenants moved in, and they came over after being there for about 2 weeks, kind of embarrassed, and said, "We don't think our solar toilet is working." So, I go over there and lift the lid, and it's totally full of some kind of primordial soup. Nothing being fried at all. It was disgusting. And the reason was that I didn't snap to until later was the masonry oven just gets warm. The metal oven gets screaming hot, and it causes the frying to take place. All I was doing was making warm soup here. And it was disgusting. And so I'm like, I've been in this position a lot over the years, and I had to buy time. Was my first. I knew I didn't have a solution, and I knew these people, were starting to lose faith, and so I just went into buy some time mode, and what I did was I went to Walmart and got a couple bags of charcoal and charcoal lighter, and I lifted up the toilet seat and dumped that all in and filled it full of charcoal lighter and lit it. And the people were gone for the day. And I came back at 5 o'clock, and it did it. The charcoal burnt all the way down and fried everything. And I had thoughts there for a minute of creating a charcoal toilet. All you do is a bag of charcoal every week or something like that. And it's made like a stove, so it vented and everything. And I went back at 5 o'clock, and there was nothing but white coals glowing down there, and all the primordial soup was gone. It did have it wasn't that thrilling, but still it was gone. So I'm like all happy. I've bought myself some time. I go out with the crew. We drink some margaritas. I get home from drinking margaritas, and there's a phone call from my maintenance guy, and he said, Mike, it's on the answering box. The fire engines had to come out. The building caught on fire because it turns out that the charcoal is the hottest when it's white coals, and it actually there's that scraper in there, and it has a metal arm that comes up and goes through the woodwork. Well, the heat traveled up and caught the front face on fire, and the building caught on fire. Fire trucks had to come out. There was a silver lining to that cloud was the front face is burning, and of course all the plumbing's on the front face, and it melted the plastic pipes, and the water started spewing on the fire, and the fireman said in the newspaper that if it wasn't an Earthship, it would have burnt to the ground, because the way the Earthship is designed, the fire burnt the pipes and opened up the water. So anyway, there I am. I bought time, but didn't work out that well. And plus, the buildings were brand new, and if you've ever cooked a turkey in the oven on Thanksgiving, your whole house smells like turkey. Well, when you cook shit, your whole house smells like shit. And, there was just this pasty smell in the whole house. And so I was out of the time buying mode at that point. I just went and put in a conventional septic tank over there, put in 2 flush toilets, repainted the whole building, spent 2 weeks and another few grand, abandoned the solar toilet idea. And of course, I was right in the middle of this new custom home. And during that whole trauma is when I decided to make the first planter. We were doing planters in the buildings anyway that used gray water to flush the toilet so I could give people a flush toilet. And it was because of the many hours of trying to deal with that situation that I got my brain to the high enough temperature that it fell into this mode here. And so this was really thanks to the shit cooking incident. But I got the whole building, the end of the story is I got the whole building all cleaned up and painted, spent a bunch of money, put in a septic tank. New people are coming from Canada to rent it. They came in at night, and the next morning they come over and they're all pissed off. And I'm what in the world is wrong? And they said, we came all the way from Canada to stay in an Earthship. And this is not a true Earthship because it doesn't have a solar toilet. So, and that's after I had just abandoned the whole solar toilet. So I just gave them their money back and told them to go get a mobile home or something. But anyway, those are learning experiences. Everything that we're doing has been from failure. miserable failure. And but it out of miserable failure comes some good things. The only problem is you usually get sued for miserable failure. So anyway, that's the nature of the gray water system. And so what we do then is, if you take a regular plumbing wall and you've got the washing machine and dryer, and then you got the bathtub, and you got the sink, you got the toilet. Over here you got the kitchen sink. Well, we take the kitchen sink and the toilet, and we take them straight out and say this is the front of the house right here. We take the kitchen sink and the toilet and we take them straight out to a conventional septic tank, and that septic tank goes into an outdoor botanical cell, which you can see at the Sutton job. That's enough to treat the water right there, because you're taking half of the water and treating it inside with the gray water system, more than half. So your washing machine, your bathtub, your lavatory, they all go to the botanical cells inside the building and inside the greenhouse, however many of them you have. What we do to fool the authorities is, as this gray water goes into the botanical cell, we have a three-way valve here that can allow it to go into the botanical cell, or let it bypass on and go right back to the black water. So really, what we have in place at any given time is a conventional system. Every piece of plumbing, every fixture, if you turn the three-way valve, goes to the septic tank. That's what they want to see. That's their worm pill and a ball of hamburger. You got a conventional system. And I showed it this way to the authorities. I actually have I think it's in the Water from the Sky book. I have a letter from the main authority, who's now dead, of the state of New Mexico. And he said, in that you have a conventional system inherently in your system, you don't even need a variance. Because even the Blackwater Botanical Cell, they don't count it. We go out of it and put in a conventional drain field. They only cost $600 or $800, and it never gets used because all the stuff goes into the septic tank, and we turn the three-way valve so that all the gray water goes into the botanical cells. At the end of the line of the botanical cells, you suck the water back to flush the toilet with, so you're using the same water. So what happens in the septic tank is we size it as if it were a normal septic tank, but it's only using half the volume, and then half the volume can easily be treated in a something like a 14 by 40 foot botanical cell, which is laying open out there at Sutton, so you can see it. And the septic tank is going right into it. But to keep them happy, this is just disregarded by them. We call it pre-treatment, and some of them appreciate it, but they don't consider it. So what we have, when we turn the three-way valve for everything to go in the septic tank, it just runs through this, they ignore it, and they have a septic tank and a drain field. And if it's in the city, we take it through the septic tank and on into the municipal sewage. So we have given the authorities a conventional system so they don't have to fret over approving of ours. And the reason for that is because state officials don't make that much money. They're not being paid to take risks on people's ideas, even though they may be, headed toward carbon zero and whatever. They just have to go by the book. So we let them go by the book. So then what really happens outside is it's another botanical cell. It doesn't need the septic tank serves as the grease and particle filter. If you don't know it, what goes on in a septic tank is an anaerobic process where bacteria is broken down, solids are broken down into a liquid. The liquid goes into the botanical cell. The botanical cell's full of plants, and they oxygenate the water and use the water. And we have gotten the size down to where there's nothing that comes out. The drain field is worthless, but we put it in to make them happy. And then what that does is we spread these botanical cells out and make them shallower and strategically located so that the building then has all these green spots happening around it from the botanical cells. There's your landscaping. There's your water for your outdoor plants. And you can see that on the newer ones. It's hard to see it because it's not happening yet. But some of the older ones, which I don't know if Kirsten's taken you to, you really see lush green in contrast to the dry, parched mesa. And that's the nature of an earthship. It brings green. No water that ever falls from the sky on your property ever goes away from your house. It's just going into plants and whatever. So that's the sewage system. To take that into different climates, the experiment we did at the Phoenix is the outdoor botanical cells. We just ended up building a greenhouse over them, so that we can illustrate how this can work in a severe northern cold climate. You know, the green is not going to be that impressive or functional if it's 40 below zero for 6 months. So it's just not going to work that well. So if you build a greenhouse over it, all of a sudden you have a whole lot more food production and a whole lot more sewage treatment and another buffer zone and on and on and on, and more water catchment because you got more roof. The Phoenix is illustrating that. The Phoenix's entire system is enclosed. And you can grow food. The food, if you grow food out of the black water, all of it, test it. We always test the food. And you take it to a testing agency and you get it tested. What we do is we'll test an artichoke out of our system, and we'll test an artichoke from the health food store. And if they test similar, then that's good enough. There are things online, we're going to get this out and documented, that tell you what items are most easy to produce out of even black water, other than, say, other than just landscaping. I'd be satisfied with just that. But you can break your black water into a series of cells. In other words, you have one cell, then another cell, then another cell. The best one to eat out of is the last one because it's gone through the cells before it and oxygenated. I mean, I wouldn't eat out of the very first black water cell out of the septic tank without super testing it. But we've done a lot of different tests, and it's always been good. Of course, the gray water is fine. You can produce a lot of food by salvaging every drop of water that you have. So nothing ever leaves. And then, like I say, you can do this completely outside in a temperate climate. You don't even have to have greenhouses for it. But there's all kinds of little idiosyncrasies. What if you're in an area like where we're going in Texas that gets 4 inches of rain a month? What would happen there is your outdoor black water cell would get saturated with rain. So what we have to do in situations like that is, one, sometimes we have to put a greenhouse over it for that reason, not to protect it from the cold, but to protect it from the rain, because the water for it comes from the sewage itself. In a not quite as bad of a situation, we'll put it out in front and slope the surface of it, and we catch the water off the front face and take it in to flush with. And even on the highway landscaping, they have these membranes that just have holes for the plants to come out, and the water then runs off of it, so you can fill this with your sewage water to water your plants and get the sky water to go away from it. So there are a lot of different applications of this relative to your temperature and your length of winter and your level of rainfall. Different conditions make it so you may have to protect or greenhouse over it. Here in this climate, we don't get enough rain to mess with it at all. All it does is stash some of the rain as well. One other aspect of this, which I just mentioned, but you can see it at the Sutton house best. We catch all the water off the roof of the house, dump it into the cisterns, like I was saying. But the front face catches a little water, and it's too low to go into the cistern. So we put a gutter at the bottom of the front face, run the gutter around and dump it into the botanical cells. They get washed out with rainwater. And even stashed up with rainwater, and they're all set. The botanical cells at the end of the line have an overflow that goes to the septic tank anyway. And then the septic tank runs to an outdoor botanical cell, and then if that ever overflowed, it would overflow into a conventional drain field. So there's all of these safeties set up for it, because we learned that the hard way. Somebody built one. We didn't build it. They took our stuff and books and built one in Colorado. And just to show you how all the systems are interrelated, this is a good example. They were in an Earthship, an early one that had the early models of all these systems. An old 80-year-old guy was staying with them, one of their fathers or something, and took his teeth out. They were going for a picnic or something. He took his teeth out to wash them in the lavatory, in the sink, and spaced out, being 80, and left the faucet running. And the other people, the younger people, didn't notice. They all got in the car and left. Came back, I think, the next day or something. And the sink just stayed running, of course. It drained their cistern into their living room planter, which didn't have an overflow, which flooded their living room. And the pump just kept running and ran down their power. So in other words, they run their power and their water and their living room all in one teeth cleaning incident. So what we learned there was, and it wasn't us because we didn't build it, but still that was a lawsuit waiting to happen. And so we have everything checked out, like if your water pump stays running too long, it turns its own circuit off. If it did for some reason keep running, it would simply go on, overflow into the septic, overflow into the botanical cell outside, and overflow on into the outside drain field and never flood your living room. As a result of that, we have every interior botanical cell with an overflow that goes to everything else. So the only way you're going to go out there, or we did, and make mistakes to tell you how to evolve the system, and we're still doing it, only it's much more minor mistakes now, and everything about this does work now. There's not many of those kind of incidents happening these days. So that is the basic water system. Anybody got questions on that? Yeah.
Because of when you put in the conventional leaching field, because you've got this economical water usage, do they require the same?
Yeah, they ignore all of it.
So you still have to put the same size.
Yeah, that's their best way of some of them will calculate with us, but most of them just say, look, it's going to be easiest for everybody if we just ignore your system. We are letting you put it in, but we're going to ignore it and put in ours. In other words, we're basically duplicating a system, but we need the septic tank anyway. Mm-hmm. So all we're duplicating is a drain field, and we just don't. $600 or $800 for a drain field is a lot cheaper than fighting the authorities and trying to prove and whatever. Yeah.
On the variable cisterns, at some point, is there ever any repair or replacement that needs to be done, and what's involved in that?
We've never had to do. In a few cases, in the older models, we've had to go in and clean out cisterns, but not much. Like the newer models with the plastic cisterns, they don't even need they don't need cleaning out. The old systems had a funkier roof. The filters would get dirty quicker. The cisterns would get dirty quicker. Now the clean metal roofs, the filters need to be cleaned, 3 or 4 times a year at the most. The cisterns never need clean. It's kind of working pretty smooth right now. All aspects of this whole integrated water system, which again, look at the electricity needed by this. That's why we stay away from the light filters and all of that. It's 2 pumps. It's 2 little DC pumps, and those pumps are DC for a reason. We're going to take a break in a minute, and then I'm going to do the power conversation, but. The DC pumps are there DC because if you take everything, normally electricians, solar designers will tell you, just invert everything to AC and use all AC stuff just like a conventional house. Well then if your inverter ever goes on a blink or fries a circuit or whatever, your whole house is down. What we do is we make the water pumps, which are very cheap and DC, the refrigeration, and some lights be DC, so that if your inverter fries, you still have a life. You can still turn your faucets on, you can still flush your toilet, you can still have ice, and you can still have some light. We only use AC for computers and TVs and things like that, and some lamps and appliances. But we make the function of the house go bypass the inverter straight with DC. So that's why there's two little DC pumps. You'll see them. Every house has got a gray water board. It's just a littler version of the freshwater board. It's a little green board that has a filter and a pump and a charcoal filter. And if you want to know where it is in each house, just flush the toilet. You'll hear it humming somewhere and follow the sound. The gray water, the freshwater boards are usually in the back hallways. In the Phoenix, we always respond to whatever. Some people have, in fact, complained about the hum of the pump when you flush the toilet. So we got them out in the greenhouses a lot. But at the Phoenix, we've even got that disappeared. So there's no hum of a pump when you flush the toilet there. But there is a hum of a pump on the water when it builds up the pressure tank, but it's in a back hallway and you can hardly hear it. Any other water? Yeah.
With the black water cells, if you put them in a greenhouse, is there any like code issues with taking black water back inside?
Not if they don't know it. Well, what we do is we call it exterior. Like what we did at the Phoenix was we did it exterior, and then we built a greenhouse over it.
Right.
So you can, and basically you call that greenhouse an exterior greenhouse. It's not part of the house. You're just sheltering. The rationale is you're sheltering the plants from either rain or cold weather, so that they can grow year round. And so you may, in the worst scenario, you may have to remove it from the house a little bit. And then it doesn't work as a buffer zone. There is no smell. No, it's sealed, see? That gray water that's in that gravel is sealed by a foot of dirt. And even, you can stick your nose down the pipes. We have observation stems everywhere.
Yeah.
There's no smell.
Black water, does it smell?
Nope. There's just no smell. So it's like, it's definitely, the people will get into, what do they call them? I mean, there's people that are paranoid of any aspect of this because of even the transpiration, the water that comes up through the plant roots and gets on the leaves. I forget what they call them. Pathogens and things, they say, that could get through, but we've never found it. In other words, compared to what you face in a city with, give me a pathogen or two, I'll take it any day. Yeah. Nah, you can use everything. The only thing you don't want to do is you don't want to pour photography chemicals or turpentine down your drain or anything like that. But you can use any of the soaps. It's real easy. It's not some kind of super organic rocket science thing. It's just don't put paint thinner down your drain. It's about all you have to remember. Yeah.
With the double greenhouse over the black water system, have you encountered anything with the humidity, with that amount of heat coming into it and the plants that?
We like it here in this climate. Yeah, you get humidity. We get rid of the humidity as much as we want by ventilation and convection-driven ventilation in the greenhouse. But like at the Phoenix, I like to close it all up, and it's like, and you walk off the dry mesa into the Phoenix, and you're like walking into a rainforest. It's great. So we haven't considered humidity as a problem, but we've experienced it. And humidity is good in this climate. In a wetter climate, you'd want to vent that humidity out to some extent, at least in the living spaces. Like in a wetter climate, you may put all the planting out in the greenhouses and not in the living spaces, so that you can vent them separately and keep your humidity trapped for the plants. So knowing the principles of all this, then you do have choices of how you're going to set it up. But you know what's going on, and you know the rationale for how to set it up. Yeah?
What about toothpaste? Does toothpaste build up in the gray water system?
No, it's like soap. It breaks down, and plants like all that stuff. All that provides nutrients for the plants. They like gray water better than fresh water. Yeah?
Do you foresee things having to be replaced through 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, I don't know what it would be. Pumps, maybe. Filters. The peat moss filter, the way I had it explained to me by the health officials, that's why I started using one, is that you never have to replace it. It just gets better. It's organic. It's an organic filter that just keeps getting more and more organic and becomes a better filter and a better filter. So it actually reduces, what they say is it reduces the nitrate loading of the water. And when you test the water, it does have low nitrate loading.
You were saying maybe after 10, 15 years, you'd have to dig up parts of your greenhouse because it becomes root bound. Is that just that top 1 foot layer of dirt, or are you actually digging down into your gray water system at that point?
Well, it actually, we haven't dug one up because of root bound. So the more roots, the better it's going to work. I mean, I've had people build these, as per our drawings, say in Colorado, call me up a couple months later and say, this thing's not working. It's all saturated. And I said, well, what kind of plants you got in it? And they said, well, we hadn't planted it yet. Well, the plants are the system, you know. This is not just a reservoir to hold water. It's a place to hold plants because plants eat water. And so the more roots, the better. No root-bound issues so far have we seen. Anything else? Yeah.
Are there some plants that are better than others?
Oh, yeah, I should mention that real quick, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll do electricity, and then the tour. What you do with these greenhouses, these botanical cells, is you start them with hardy plants that are more bomber and strong, especially with gray water, they even get stronger. I've got a list of them in the Water from the Sky book, but it's like bananas for sure, bougainvillea, all the geranium family, all the wandering Jew family, aloe. These plants up here are the ones. Philodendron, grapes, all of those kind of plants, all the Jew ground covers, they tend not to get bugs anyway. And they tend to grow fast, they tend to be hardy. So what you do is you just if you notice, the buildings, lots of them that you're going to see aren't finished. And they're all full of these kind of plants. And because we plant them, the crew trumps on some of them even, but we just want to get the planter established because it is the sewage system. And we put plants out there just struggling to survive with the crew dragging cords and tools through and everything. But the plants get in there and get established. And you get the whole thing covered with plants. The jade plant's a good one. And that starts the sewage eating process. Then, after you got your sewage being eaten after a few months, then you go in and you carve out a little place and you stick in a rose. And the roses do great, but not all by themselves. They like to be surrounded by companion planting or whatever. Tomatoes, if you filled your whole greenhouse with tomatoes, why, you'd have white flies. We get plenty of volunteer tomatoes and pot plants in our planters because the crew sits on the planters and eat lunch and whatever. But so we get all these volunteer plants coming up, and then we don't notice it until somebody's in there and whatever. Hopefully it's not a state official. But you carve out and put in food then, and cantaloupes and all. If you just started the whole thing with food, you'd have bugs. You must have these strong, hardy plants that are resistant to bugs as the basis. And then you place the foods and the flowers in between. And I've eaten it from the Phoenix. I've eaten sweet corn. You know, I would go over there at lunch and graze. I eat carrots. I eat tomatoes. Now I eat tilapia, corn, bananas, grapes, watermelon, everything. I mean, I just graze from the Phoenix grocery store, yeah.
Could you grow like pineapple?
We have a pineapple growing over there.
Or
Citrus.
what about like trees? So you can grow like citrus trees? Or
Yep,
apple trees?
we have a tangerine tree in the Phoenix is the biggest one. We got grapefruit, lime, huh? Yeah.
Figs? Can you grow figs?
We got a fig tree growing in the Phoenix.
I love you.
So you can just grow, we're trying to find out what you can't grow, but so far, everything. I mean, that's why what we're doing, is, when you see the Phoenix, if you haven't seen it, you'll see why it has inspired us to do what we're doing with this Eve project, the building you were working on here yesterday. We're hooking a greenhouse onto this building, going across in front of the 2 tower buildings, across the architect's office where you were pounding tires, onto the next rental units. it's going to be, you know, a huge Amazon jungle greenhouse to produce food, because we're seeing that we can survive. You know, 25 people can survive here. We don't need power. We don't need water. We don't need sewage lines. We don't need grocery stores. We can live, and that is freedom. So, all right, we'll take a break and do power. 15 minutes or so. Let's come back at 11-ish. So we kind of devised this system after I think Kirsten probably showed you pictures of the Dennis Weaver house that we did in Colorado like 20 some odd years ago, and 20-ish years ago. And we hired, you know, he had money. He was a movie actor. So he had the money to buy whatever. And so we got the best solar technicians we could find. We flew them in. And that power system cost about $80,000 even 20 years ago, or more, close to $100,000. And it looked like the engine room of a submarine. Nobody even knew how to use it. It was in that time then that I decided to go in this direction. And what I had been living with crude forms for a long time, but I didn't consider myself a technician. And here's what I saw is I hired the best trained solar, in those days, technicians that I could to design this electrical system for me. I didn't consider myself as knowing enough to do that, yet I had been living out on the desert with probably the second divorce of the second wife by then or something, because this tends to be hard on wives. I'm sitting out there, you know, with our toilet is a 55-gallon drum with a hot plate in the bottom of it and things like that. So, but I'd been living with solar and wind electricity. I knew how to use it. I knew the idiosyncrasies of it. All these high-powered people that I flew into Colorado for Dennis Weaver's house had not lived with it. They knew the formulas and they knew how to design it, but they lived in homes that were on the grid. Their office was on the grid. I was living with it, and I found out that, in fact, in practicality and pragmatic experience, I knew more than they did. So I blew them all off after Weaver's house and started doing our own system, and nobody wanted to do it this way. They called me an idiot, but we had been through it. We had our offices then on inverters and solar power, and we had experienced what happens when the inverter fries. Nothing works. No print machines, no computers, no anything. Nothing works when the inverter fries. So that's when we developed this system with AC and DC, and that's why we do it. You are not vulnerable to one piece of equipment going bad when you're for your whole system. Your house will still function. And so that's the rationale for it. It makes good sense. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. Now, other than that, then you're looking at choice between sun, wind, hydro. This power system is set up to receive power from sun, wind, hydro, generator, gas generator, or line grid. All it does is channel all the energy to the batteries. You don't have a dual system. You just have many sources going to the same bank of batteries. Now, people ask a lot about wind. I would say only use wind if you have to. It's great, but it's moving parts. Photovoltaic panels are not moving parts. They're good for at least 20 to 30 to 40 years. They don't have any moving parts. They're not going to wear out. And in a climate like this with 300 plus sun days a year, they're going to be your best bet. I play with wind, and we're actually working on a new vertical axis windmill. Kirsten may have showed you pictures in history of some vertical axis windmills. They are the best. They aren't as efficient, but they last longer. Like every store-bought propeller windmill we've played with, there's these two towers out here, two posts, used to have windmills on them. They blew apart. Windmills blow apart, their maintenance. You send them back to the factory, they fix them the first time, it costs you $300 or $400 to get them down and back up, and freight and all that. So I don't use windmills. The reason I play with windmills here is so I can get some experience, so I can use them in Norway or places that don't have much sun. If you're in an area that's got even 275 sun days a year, put your money into solar panels, not windmills. Solar panels are, the bigger you buy them, the less connections you have. So right now we're using 200 watt Kyocera's, BP Solar. Almost any kind is pretty good these days, but 200 watt is when they get 300 watt, I'll use them, because the bigger the panel, the less connections. There are things coming out even in these kind of panels, but also they call thin film. We're playing with it right now, but the reason we're playing with it is because some of these newer products that are not really out there big time yet produce power. See, a 200 watt panel may produce 30 watts on a cloudy day. These new thin film solar ones, they may produce like 60 or 70. In other words, they're getting, the panel manufacturing is getting to the point where they're producing power from light, not just sun. It's out there, they just haven't gotten it in here yet. The reason you know it's out there, if you go buy a solar calculator at Walmart, it will charge from the white lights of Walmart. I've even used a solar calculator in a full moon before. And so it's light, it's photons. So that's coming. And so panels that produce power on cloudy days are going to make a lot of sense. But even 60 or 70% on a cloudy day not 60 or 70, even close to 50% on a cloudy day, is not good for a regular house, which brings you to the nature of these buildings is such that we have done everything we possibly can in power, in water, sewage, heating, and cooling to reduce the amount of electricity that you need. There's no lights on in this room because there's a lot of solar gain and light. There's no fans to cool because there's natural convection cooling. There's very minimal water pump action. You can hear it in there. Or maybe that's the water pump. She's probably running water into the toilet because you didn't get to take your showers yet. She's in the shower? Kill her. All right. Great.
She said she'd be first.
Yep. So there's very minimal power used in these homes. That means we can have a very small system. You take this system, our best system, 6 or 8 panels, 6 or 8 batteries, the latest 2.5K, they call that small, see? You need a 10K system at least to run a conventional home because conventional homes are just full of things that draw power. The entertainment centers are on all the time, and we have timers on ours. See, at the Phoenix, it's got a flat screen TV, it's got a DVD player, but you have to turn a timer, and it goes off in 2 hours. And if you're watching Lord of the Rings, you got to turn it back on or something. But see, we would have people leave it all on all the time. They'll go off skiing and leave the coffee maker on. Those kind of things can ruin it. So we've had to idiot-proof the houses. And design them down in their use of power. And you have everything. At the Phoenix, you have high-speed internet, you have flat-screen TV, coffee makers, everything. But it's all set up so you can't really screw up. And just like everything else, we thought we had it together. We're making radical changes now in the amount of power used at the Phoenix. We're having to do that because our tilapia, we've gotten so into our tilapia, we have pumps going to aerate the water, and that's a must. The water has to be aerated and circulated, and it takes some power for them. And that's one of those situations where it's put us in a pinch. We've either got to buy more panels or get smarter, and it just turns out that it's easy to get smarter in the last 6 or 8 months because LED lighting is really getting out there. We took a 50-watt lighting situation and brought it down to 5 watts. That's like 10% of the power. The new houses are going to be all LED. We're going back and retrofitting the old houses. You can, because see, the bulk of your load of electricity in one of these buildings is lighting at night. You know, a little bit for a computer. And how was the shower?
Oh, I took a bath.
All right.
It was the most awesome bath. I was cradled by the earth.
All right. Good for you. We need the water. We need the water to flush. Now some people can use the toilet.
I was working with the Earthship, like we were working together, and I wasn't polluting the planet.
All right.
For the first time ever when I've taken a bath. It was just incredible.
So yeah, the LED lighting then is getting to be, it comes in, it's strange how they put stuff out there. It kind of works against us a little bit because the best, easiest to find LED lighting is AC. And they do make DC, but it's only 12 volt. They make a few 24 volt DCs, and that's what we use in these buildings. So for us to keep our lighting, some house lighting, emergency house lighting, not on the AC inverter, we do have to use compact fluorescents. And see, compact fluorescents were a big thing. They would cut it by 70% or something like that. But now maybe they'd cut it in half or whatever. They're much more efficient than a regular incandescent bulb. But the LEDs are phenomenal. And they're getting to the point where they put them out. They make a lot of light now, too. So we're switching the whole Phoenix, which has taken us a while, over to LEDs. All of the new buildings will be LEDs. So we're moving in the direction of cutting down the power use even further. And see, a normal house, you can go into a normal house and put in LEDs these days. But still, this power system is small because the Earthship doesn't need much power. And it used to be, you would even see in some of the older buildings a slot for a generator because the backup generator just plugs in and charges through the system to the batteries. We don't even do that anymore. At the Phoenix, we have had done that recently because of the tilapia, but now we've got the LEDs happening, and they're already more than compensating for the extra pumps for the tilapia. And so we don't use backup generators. We don't even prescribe them anymore in a regular home. Because the power system is set up with safeguards, so you can't really screw it up, and LED lighting, and just a minimal use of power. And that makes you and still, that minimal use of power, the power system ends up costing still $25,000. And the nature of the building is, these buildings actually cost, say, 15% less than equivalent conventional buildings, equivalent quality conventional buildings. But then you throw in the power, water, and sewage, that brings you up to the same or maybe 5% more. So it is the systems that make these buildings cost at least the same as conventional housing, but they make it so you have no utility bill. And having no utility bill is one thing. You know, having a house like the one of the global models that we're selling, we're guaranteeing to the realtor, if these people that buy this house in the first 5 years have over $100 a year utility bill, we'll pay it. That's how sure we are. So that's where it's at, it's a savings in money, but it's more than a savings in money these days because it's a security. You're in a home that you're not, if the economy crashes, is your power going to go out? If there's a fuel shortage, is your power going to go out? Not in a home that's independent. And I push the concept more than anything. In other words, maybe there are other ways to do all of this. I don't know who's doing it, but I welcome any of it. The point is, be off of the grids, not just to be cheaper, but to be more secure. And then, of course, that ends up translating into carbon zero and a soft footprint on the planet of people. The planet could support, 50 times as many people as are on here now if they were living. If they were living in a way that enhanced the planet. Like a lot of answers I get from my own thinking are from trees. Like trees basically enhance the planet. They grow here. They drop their foliage and make dirt soil for new trees. They have their own photosynthesis. They have their own absorption of nutrients from the soil. They simply, and plus, they just make the planet better. They put out CO2, oxygen, and take in CO2, which fixes the planet so that mammals have a better situation because they need oxygen. And so the trees are actually almost the guardians of the planet. And we're, of course, lunching them right and left, the rainforests and everything. But you never hear anybody say there are too many trees. The trees are really the model citizens of the planet. And we're trying to make humans do the same as trees do in terms of just logic. I even get my feathers ruffled when people call me an environmentalist or something like that. I don't really buy all that. It's just logic, that if you enhance the world around you, then you're basically reinforcing your own existence, really. And so that's kind of the logic that's behind these buildings. And so the buildings are aimed at treading softly on the planet and needing less. But it doesn't mean, you're doing without anything. It means that you're strategically gathering what you need. And that's the way this power system is set up. So if you have over 275 sun days a year, I suggest staying with PV panels and maybe experimenting with the thin film stuff. We are, and we'll be putting it out on the website, what we learn and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Have you got a hold of the thin film?
We got some in, and what we did is in the Phoenix, when you go there, you've been there, I think. Oh, great. Yeah. The tilapia pond last fall got below 60 degrees in the water is lethal for tilapia. They're a tropical fish. So we were just getting ready to have a fish fry, and all our fish died. And it was because the water got down to 58 degrees. So this year we got a swimming pool collector, and it's got a thin film panel powering a little submersible boat village pump that shoves the water, whenever the sun's out, it shoves the water through the collector, and it comes out. It's probably just going to bump the water up enough to keep it above 60 degrees. It's working. And so we got a thin film solar panel to do that. And we observed the other day, it was cloudy. The pump was still working. So it's like, with the typical panels, the pump would just go off. Right. So the thin film solar panels, everybody poo-poos them because they're not near as efficient. It takes more area for this amount of wattage than it does for the actual full-on panels. But who cares? Area. The thing is, they make power in cloudy days. So
what's the price comparison on the two?
It ends up per watt being even a little less expensive. Right. It's just they say they're not as durable for lasting forever. They're not as efficient, and so because everybody's out for in the real world out there. They need massive amounts of power to run their massive houses that have massive demands. The first thing on any level of survival is reduce your demands first. Then, if you're going to Everest on a trek, are you going to take your grand piano with you or not? Do you make a decision? Well, I want to stay alive up here, so I really don't think I'm going to take my grand piano. And so the future is kind of a trek, really, for people to deal with the future. So you're designing your life down. Again, you're not doing without. You're just what's logical for you to take to Everest, what's logical for you to take into the future. So the buildings are designed down, and it turns out that we can power them fine with a minimal power system. So that's kind of the rationale behind the overall design of the system. Then there are things like, to stay into solar panels for a minute, if you do use wind, we are developing in the history, whether Kirsten showed it to you or not, I don't know. We had vertical axis windmills. We actually had one spin for 25 years with no maintenance. That's decent. Pillow block bearings, real basic. Sure, it's not as efficient as these little propeller ones, but the propeller ones are down every year. In other words, look at the overview. People tend to just go away from something if it's not as efficient. But look at it over time. Add the element of time to any decision that you make, and it's going to vastly change your mind on things. I mean, as a matter of fact, add the element of time to the whole concept of fossil fuel. You know, it's going to vastly change your mind on whether to even participate in fossil fuel to any degree or not. So every decision that you make should be adding the element of time. So we are playing with vertical axis windmills that will be durable, that will last 25 years, that put out a little power. They're fun. It's fun to be setting, I've done it, to be setting at night, watching a vertical axis windmill pump power into your batteries. And, you know, so then if it's raining, you're happy, you're getting water. If it's sunny, you're happy, you're getting power. If it's windy, you're happy, you're getting power. It's like you're happy all the time. You're always getting something from the world around you. It's no more rainy day issues. But solar panels, then, another thing to talk about with them is you'll see all kinds of different aspects of this all over the community. The first thing, one of these posts out here was a tracker to track the sun. So I was convinced by my electrician to use the tracker out here. Notice it's not out here anymore. Because the price of the tracker, $1,500, which would have bought maybe 2 panels, saves you the price of panels because it's always getting the most out of the sun because it's tracking it. What they don't tell you after using them is that if it's windy, trackers blow out of the sun. So if it's windy and sunny, you're screwed. And in super cold climates, it sort of doesn't really get started moving because it's all kind of frozen up until 11-ish. And then it quits again at 1:30 or 2. And so and then they blow down and break, and they're big sails, and they look industrial and so on. So we learned very early on to blow off the tracker, put that money into more panels, and we made our own little racks on the front of the buildings that adjusted out for the high. They had a hinge here. They adjusted out for the high summer sun and adjusted down for the lower winter sun. That means you have to go up on your pro-panel roof and fall on your ass in the snow and adjust your panels twice a year. So we started moving away from that, and the apparatus to even hinge these and mount them and do this cost as much as 2 or 3 more panels. So what we did was we just took, okay, we'll put all of the money for trackers and racks and everything, buy more panels, bigger panels, and we'll decide what the average year angle is, and for here it's right at 45 degrees. So if you notice on the global model, there's a 45-degree slope up here and then the steeper one, and there's where our solar energy comes to. It's halfway between the winter and summer angle, no adjustments, no moving parts, and we're fine. In other words, all of this tracking and high-tech stuff just costs money and is maintenance. The less technology you can get into, I mean, we're definitely using high technology. We're solar panels and inverters and things, but just keep it simple, and you keep the maintenance down, you keep the price down, and it works fine. We put all the money into panels. We do not do tracking of any kind, winter, summer, or morning, evening, night, whatever. So that's definitely the story on panels. You stay with the bigger wattage, because like on these older buildings, you see we got a whole, we got 30, 50 watt panels, and they're on trackers. So, you have to have a maintenance man just to deal with that. And so we're going to switch all of them. We got so many buildings that we can't keep up really. And that's another thing. You don't want to have to keep up. You want everything to be so that, you don't have to do maintenance. The early versions of all of this was a lot of things you had to do. It was like running a sailboat. But now the versions that we have out now, they're very minimal in terms of operation and maintenance. So, but if you're in a cloudy area, my recommendation now would be thin film solar panels, which still would go right on that same place. You can actually surface the whole area. Right now, if you notice, like on the global model that you'll see in a little bit, there's like 6 panels up there, or 4 in some cases. Well, it takes more area with the thin film solar, so you just surface this whole thing. The whole length of the building would be a solar collector of thin film. And then that's going to get you, in a cloudy area, that's going to get you some power, even in cloudy days. And then, in the cloudy area, you would throw in a vertical axis windmill. But it would be within a couple of 3 months, we will have this real beautiful one we call a dynasphere. It's a sphere with a vertical axis. And the reason it's a sphere is because these cylinder ones, it's all about small amount of wind starting the blade, and everybody knows the principle of leverage. Well, on a cylinder, there's just a little bit of leverage. Look how much more leverage there is on a sphere with the same height. There's a lot more leverage in the blade. And plus, it's beautiful. So we're making this whole sculptural thing that's going to set out here on this big post and spin and make power. And so we'll be taking those to Norway and different places where it's cloudy. And so windmills are a maintenance issue. I mean, if you ever see like the wind farms, in addition to being dangerous for flocks of birds and whatever that, they're always, half of them, have you ever seen a wind farm with every windmill turning? They're always half of them down. It's maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. And a bit of danger and an environmental hazard and so on. I don't particularly buy wind farms. The one wind farm I did like was in the bay out in front of Copenhagen. They've got a bunch of them out in the sea. That's pretty cool. That's not bad. But still, see, the whole thing with wind farms is, other than maintenance, it's clustered power, centralized power, that you're having to move through an infrastructure to get to the homes. So centralization is really the wrong direction, in my opinion. A good example of centralization being faulty is, say, a municipality gets, it has to do with the condition of the planet now and what we have to do to cope with the planet changing very fast. Population growing, resources dwindling, climate change, for whatever reason, whether it's man-caused or not. The world around us is changing. We need to evolve. We're used to evolving very slowly. We need to evolve faster. Here is part of our dilemma. Typical municipality of 50,000 people may go together and get their tax dollars together and build a coal-fired power plant or some kind of a centralized utility. That process takes, a few years to raise the money once the commission votes on it. Get some architects and engineers to design it for a couple years with the latest, best technology. Then get it built for 3 or 4 years. And then they've got $50 million in this power plant. And they are stuck with that now. They've got $50 million in it. They've got to use it for 50 years. They're not going to evolve with something new coming out in the next year because they've already got their $50 million spent. So where they are is they are taking their increment of evolution and making it be 50 years. So that little municipality can't evolve except every 50 years. Well, the strongest things on the planet are bacteria and virus. They evolve boom, 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 just like that as fast as we come up with new antibiotics. They come up with new evolutions because they're little small, simple things. So centralization limits our evolution to big increments like 50 years. Building one home that has everything in it. Hell, a home is built every hour on this planet. So we can take our increment of evolution down to an hour. Because every time, if the whole world were building these kind of homes, they would be building one every hour or less, and things would be learned every hour. Because every time we build one, we just got the Sutton one almost done, we've got changes to make because we've learned more. So our increment of evolution is way down, and that's what's necessary to make it through the future. If we keep limiting ourselves to 50-year increments of evolution, we're just going to go down the tubes, stuck. It's all about evolution. Centralization of utilities is killing us. Decentralization gives us a door to the future so that we can maybe keep up with bacteria and virus. Or what we're trying to do is mimic them. We're trying to be like bacteria and virus, just infect the whole damn planet. So, so that's a good argument, I think, for homes, just the overall concept, for homes doing everything for the people. In addition to that, I always, I look at all the positive things, and there's a lot of them. In addition to facilitating more rapid evolution, it empowers people. All of a sudden, you're in charge of your power. Nobody can shut your power off. You're in charge of your water. You're in charge of your sewage. You're in charge of your life. You own your life. So we're taking that even further so that, yeah, right now you have to buy this, and it's the same game as buying a conventional home, loans, bank payments, and so on. That's why we're taking this EVE project further to actually take the economic aspect out of that so that you can just walk into this EVE project and start working and have a place to live. That is decentralized, that is secure, rather than walking into a $1,500 a month mortgage and going through the begging and pleading for a bank to loan you the money and all of that. I mean, still, we're doing that too because we're selling Earthships right and left, and some people have cash on hand to pay for them, and some still have to get loans. But we have recognized that need for people just to need to walk off the streets and into this kind of living. And if we are successful, and I'm sure we will be with the EVE project, if we can make it happen fast enough, we won't just be building Earthships around the world. We'll be building Earthship village ecologies around the world to just take people off the streets and right into, 1, an education, 2, a place to live, 3, a job that gives them a place to live, and their need for money is going to be down to the point where they could panhandle and get enough for a jug of wine, because that's really all they would need, unless we start making our own booze too, which we probably will.
I didn't know you said grapes grow.
Yeah, grapes grow. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So the whole argument for decentralization is a huge argument. The president is being hit with trying to use the centralized utilities and evolve them, like putting power back into the line grid. Well, what happens when the grid goes down? I mean, does anybody ask him that? The president is not getting advised very well, although he's trying. He can't be an experienced person in this. He has to depend on people to give him that advice. And the general consensus out there is using the grid. Take advantage of the grid. We've got the grid. Well, the grid is, it's like taking advantage of a bowling pin around your neck or something. Get rid of it.
Michael,
Yeah.
one of the things I discovered, obviously where I live in Los Angeles, we're connected to the grid. We put in solar power, and it wasn't until the system was installed that I discovered that when the grid goes down, so does my solar power. It shuts off because they don't want it going back onto the grid.
Yeah.
So the solar power that I put in there doesn't even allow me to run when they break.
What that's like is like when the Titanic sunk and everybody was scattered out over the North Atlantic in the little few life rafts that they had. This would be, what we're doing with situations like that is we're anchoring the life rafts to the Titanic itself. So as it goes down, it takes the life rafts with it. I mean, we need life rafts independent of the Titanic and get away from it because it's going down. It already is in trouble. And so we're constantly moving forward with, the technology on the buildings, but the method of making them happen, the biggest bugaboo that I've seen in the last year and a half has been the economy. If the economy can cause people to not have a home, then we have a problem. The economy is a game that you play like Monopoly for motorcycles, flat screen TVs, and sewing machines or whatever. But the sustenance of people should not be subject to an economy. People should have shelter, water, food, and energy, regardless of economy. And if that's possible, and we're trying to show that it is possible, then you could, that can affect everything from health to war to everything, to spread that potential around the world. It's like, you know, right now our country is going around the world exploiting other countries for oil, when really we have the technology, we have the funding, we have everything to go around the country and just make sure every man, woman, and child on this planet has a home with, you know, food and water. And that is possible with just one of the budgets, either the war budget or the health, education, and welfare budget, or any one of the budgets could give everybody on this planet a home. Yeah.
Have you guys ever applied for any sort of federal grants to try to develop this more?
No. People are telling us, it's true, we know there's a lot of grant money out there. We could get our hands on it to some extent. But it's like there's a lot of strings attached to getting a grant. It kind of puts you on the radar, and I prefer to fly under the radar for lots of reasons. And so, but I'm not really, because I'm out there, you know, in a lot of different ways. But yeah, so we haven't exploited that. I don't know if we will or whatever. We try to make everything that we do. We've had to do this because we have been sued, screwed, and tattooed up one side and down the other. So we have had to be like when a zebra is born to a herd in Africa, the herd moves on. That zebra or giraffe or whatever better learn to walk in like 20 minutes or it's going to get left behind because the herd is moving. So our ideas have to support us immediately. So we've always made it so that what we're doing supports us. Fortunately, our needs are not that extensive. You know, we all drive Mercedes, but they're all 1950, 60, and 70, held together with rivets and whatever. But we all are living, you know, we're living, as far as we're concerned, we're in the lap of luxury, but it doesn't take much to supply it, you know. I mean, Amy, or the woman who handles our books and everything, she gives me $500 a week. You know, it's all I need. So that's just like designing down the houses. We're designing down our lifestyle, so we just don't need that much, so it's easy to make it work. And that brings up one other point that I think is significant, and that is the idea of we've had a lot of investors like want to buy us out and buy into this and all kinds of things, and every single one of them wanted to just increase profits, stop evolution, start manufacturing, and get this out there. There's a fortune to be made, and the actual this company has never made a profit ever. I've been doing it for a long time, and the way that that gives it a buoyancy. In other words, profit and is a weight in a balloon almost. You've got to make a bunch of profit for the board of directors. The fact that nobody needs a profit in this company gives it a buoyancy. I mean, we're traveling light, and you have to travel light to find out about new terrain, and so it actually becomes a way of life. It becomes a lifestyle. Which maybe is even a valid lifestyle for the entire planet, you know, which gets you further and further away from economy. I mean, it's insane that some kind of a game like economy can stand between people and feeding themselves. So it's all, when you start looking at it overall, it's all interrelated. You know, we're not just talking about environmentalism. We're not just talking about recycling or energy or fossil fuel or economy or politics or even spirituality. We're talking about everything all into one movement, and that's how we live on this planet. So, are there any other questions on electricity? Yeah.
You experiment with alternative battery systems, like compressed air or race systems?
We have looked into that. There's lots of different ones, like flywheel is one I kind of like. They do it in the space modules where they power up with solar a giant flywheel that's spinning so fast they have to put it underground or in a steel vault in a spaceship. But the power goes off and the thing keeps spinning they've got it spinning in a vacuum, so there's no friction, and it just keeps spinning and producing power as it slowly winds down. So you're storing power in momentum. And then there's, storing power by getting something up high and then letting it come down slowly. And there are a lot of, then battery technology, actual cell battery technology is getting better because of battery cars. So I think batteries are the weak link in what we're doing, and people will give us static about that. They'll give us static about anything they can. And what I'm saying is, it's worth it all. I realize that, we actually came up with a good line for that. We're going to make a t-shirt of it. There is a lot wrong about the way we try to do things right. And that's the truth. Batteries are bad, but they give us the freedom. They give us a dependency, and from that dependency, we're opening up our minds to the point where we can see way, way beyond. And batteries got us there. Batteries are wrong, but they got us there. It's kind of a thing like if you're climbing a mountain, you aren't always going up. Sometimes you're going horizontal and even down to get to a place that you can go up from. And we experience that all the time. So when people rag us about batteries or the bad insulations that we use, or which there are many things that we do that aren't perfect, but we're just simply trying to get to a level from which we can see the level beyond. And it's like I've even made a diagram. I'm visual, so I have to make little pictures for myself to understand what the hell I'm thinking. But so I'm like, I'm standing here, and here's a big plateau, and there's a peak here and another plateau, and over here, and there's a peak here. Well, my line of sight, see, this is the ultimate peak right here. This is nirvana, or whatever you want to call it, the solution. I can't even see it, so I don't even know it's there. So I get here, and I still can't see it. And maybe I have to do some weird stuff to get here, and some weirder stuff to get here and to get here. And finally, I just get so I can see it. But what I'm saying is I have to get, however I can, to a place where I can at least see where I want to go. And that's a big issue with the whole situation right now. People are stymied down here because they can't even see where they're going. And all I'm saying is just get me higher, and then I'll be able to see what's beyond. And who knows, when I get here, maybe I can see something else. But it's an approach to everything, really, that filters back down to whether to use a windmill or solar panels in what kind of a climate. Yeah.
So have there been any applications on any Earthships that have been built with like hydro wheels, shit like that, where there's been a running source of water, a river, or a lot of rainfall?
We've had a few of them that have. The one in Scotland had a little spring coming out into the loch, so we tapped into it and a windmill. So between the hydro and the windmill, we made up for the fact that Scotland doesn't have much sun. The hydro's worth it. There are many places where hydro's cool, but the percentage of places where hydro is cool is very minimal, compared to sun or even wind. So hydro's last on the list, but it's certain. Anytime there's any form of energy, we would be tapping into it. Yeah.
One other question: have you heard of this high-end form of electrolysis that is used to separate hydrogen and oxygen molecules and then store the hydrogen in the hydrogen fuel cells?
Heard about it, but not that familiar with it. And when hydrogen is being talked about a lot. It is coming until it's here. Yeah, it takes.
With the hydrogen and oxygen,
But they can do it from solar, and it's up and coming. It's just not as easily available yet.
It is very.
I saw a documentary about it basically.
In Denmark, they're really on that.
Yeah, and there are a lot of other ones too, and we're set up just to, glom them into this whole concept anytime they're there and available. What we're looking at is there's a part of our work that is totally research, but then there's a part of it that is mainstream. What have we got from all of this 40 years of work that we can put into the mainstream right now have an effect on where the mainstream's going? Yeah.
Could you talk about batteries for a little while, about kinds of batteries, material, whatever?
Well, we have. We used to use the golf cart batteries that last 5 to 7 years because they were cheap, lighter, easier to handle. But I got, when I got into so many buildings out here, there's always one building that you're replacing batteries on. So I didn't want to switch to the 20-year batteries because I figured battery technology is going to radically change in 20 years, and I'll be stuck with these 20-year-old batteries that I don't need. But the power system is set up to, you can interchange batteries as battery technology evolves. But we have moved to the 15-year batteries, and the Phoenix has 20-year batteries. And it is nice because we don't have to do anything. They cost $1,000 a piece, and there's 6 of them. But once they're there, and I don't have to think about it for 20 years, and that's kind of good. So we're down to the brand is Rolls batteries, and they're big and heavy. They're 400 pounds. They take a lot of people to carry them, and but they just last. They're deep cycle, and then that technology itself is evolving rapidly because we're staying closely behind the electric cars, because that's where the battery technology is getting money put into it from, and so that stuff will be available to us in the not too distant future. Do you have a question, Paul?
Yeah. Why didn't you just get a less tropical fish to reduce your power demand in the Phoenix instead of?
That's a good question. We could have. We could just get trout and not have to be dealing. Well, I guess there's not a good reason for that other than tilapia tastes good. Tilapia grow fast. They prolifically multiply. There were some rationales, but nothing really worth anything. So we're just doing it.
You were getting food.
Yeah.
I was wondering if, as far as communities go, you've looked into any sort of small-scale centralization of power, because, the spots we're looking, it's all forest, so you don't really have the option of putting, solar on each unit. But we were thinking about doing, a central location for power. Have you done anything like that?
No, I can't say that I have. I am, see, like the Eve project, it will be approaching that thinking because
financially it's hard to do a solar setup. If you want to do a cheap dwelling, you can't really.
Well, that's another thing. We are looking at there's $25,000 to $30,000 worth of utilities in each one of these buildings. So if you're going into something else, what we're doing is taking the Eve is going to have something on the order of that. In other words, this whole jungle, this Amazon jungle that goes from the end of this building to the other one, is the gray and black water system for 25 people. That's centralization on a small scale. The water catchment is going to be shared throughout all the buildings, putting cisterns wherever we can and then tandeming everything up for everybody. And the power, that's one of the major things we're trying to work on with Eve is the power is going to be room at a time. In other words, now that if you get down to a very minimal amount of power with a few LED lights trying to light up a room, then we hang a piece of thin film out somewhere on the south panel and run some 2-watt LED lights, and that power is so small that the battery to store it can be sealed and in line and can be in a drawer of a dresser. So it all of a sudden gets to be, for $350 you can light up a room as opposed to $30,000 for 6 rooms. So we're taking and so what I'm getting at there is in some ways we're adding the element of centralization on a small scale, and some ways we're even decentralizing further to make every room. Because see, this is going to house 25 people. Each person's really just going to have a room. They're going to be sharing the Amazon jungle, and there's even shared showers and toilets and stuff. So their room is the only thing they have, and they have their own power for their room because it's $350 per room to power up a room. They will probably share the AC off of 1 or 2. See, in this group of buildings already, there's 3 power modules. We're going to try to use those 3 power modules to do all the AC for the computers and TVs and whatever, and then give everybody in each room, or maybe a couple lives in one room or whatever, but everybody in each room their own power. So we're thinking on a small scale in that direction, and it's not that I would say you have to be a fanatic and totally decentralized, but when you get into a situation, you'll find that if you're willing to decentralize to some extent, you can take steps. We're always willing to do anything. We don't really have any rules. We just have directions, because you make rules and all of a sudden you're encumbered by your own damn rules.
Yeah. The best we've come up with so far is just double A's and making everybody come and recharge their double A's.
Yeah, could do that. Get you a DeWalt Life.
Yeah, teach people a little bit.
I have the feeling that schools and health centers should be built like this. Do you have anybody who's buying into it? Any businesses?
Well, we're talking to a lot of schools. We've talked to hospitals. It's all talk, because there's different financing and different people's money, and people want to take less chances and whatever. It's still scary for a lot of people, but like I say, there's been a lot of talk on schools, mostly eco centers and education centers. There's a lot of talk on a lot of different commercial things, but the best thing we're doing, for us, the most important project we're doing is the EVE project, because it's going to involve a lot of people, and it is an educational thing. And the visitor center that the town asked us to do out south of town has got 2 or 3 other phases. First of all, it's a visitor center. Then they want to go on and do the first carbon zero restaurant with a jungle in it and everything, and half the salads and everything coming from that. And then the town wants to do this. See, they're trying to bring tourism to the town on the wings of the Earthship that's already present here. So they want to do carbon zero restaurant, then a carbon zero lodge, motel, and then a carbon zero activity center. So they've got big plans out there if we're successful on this first one. Yeah.
As far as power goes, are you somehow doing some sort of small scale hydro thing from the cistern? Because you said it's gravity fed, so it's sort of like a small tiny river. But if you just link up a hydro thing,
you could get enough to light a LED light bulb off of something like that. Another thing we're talking about doing is look how many people go to the spa. If you hooked up all the bikes and the running treadmills and all that to power, first of all, it'd power the spa. But see, then I could get into a spa. Going to a spa and just slugging away for nothing is crazy, especially when you have tires to pound. But if the machine was hooked up to lighting street lights in the town or something, hell, I'd be there running every day. Otherwise, I'm going to be in the mountains. Yeah.
Just wondered if there's any other crazy innovations you've got that you could share with us. If they're not
I have some, but I can't share them.
What about biogas?
Bio what?
Biogas with food waste.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. We haven't gone there because we've gotten gas down to just cooking. And like in the EVE project, we probably won't even have a gas range. We'll have solar ovens. Because in this climate, you can cook anything with a solar oven. And then people say microwaves are bad, but they will run off of a solar power system. So I would be inclined to, if there was no sun out, throw something in a microwave, plug in a coffee pot to the solar power for coffee, and do everything else in a solar oven. But so what I'm getting at there, to answer your question, is our need for gas has been so minimal. We just said, hell with it. We got other things to do. But we're definitely open to all of those branches. But I find myself, with a limited amount of brain cells, and it gets less each week, actually.
So. There's 30 people chucking food away, and you've already got compost.
Yeah. We should be doing it.
Quite a lot to make gas
Yeah.
from.
We should be doing it, and as we get more people involved, we will be. All right, I'm losing my voice, and you're out of time. So go on the tour in about 40 minutes with Kirsten, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.